Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Contemporary Islamic Issues and Concepts on Huda TV. I'm your host, Arqam Rashid. In this episode, we will continue the third part to the concept of takfir. In the first episode that we did concerning takfir, we spoke about the rules, the regulations, what is takfir in Islam. And then we went on to discuss some of the concepts, and we answered many of the questions that were related to the obstacles and concepts. Now we're going to start this program by continuing some of the obstacles and some of the conditions that are there when making takfir, and from there we will extract many interesting questions for the Shaykh. So let's start off by welcoming him to the program. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Asim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, so the last program we spoke about some of the conditions and obstacles, and you gave us two wonderful examples. So continuing from there, let's start with example number 3, inshallah, of an obstacle.
So if alhamdulillah, if I'm not mistaken, we spoke about ignorance and we spoke about misinterpretation.
Yes.
So there is a third obstacle, which is error. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. So do not burden us if we forget or we make a mistake. So error or making a mistake is forgiven in Islam. And the greatest and most famous hadith that everybody knows, where the Prophet ﷺ tells us that لَاللَّهُ أَفْرَحُ بِتَوْبَةِ عَبْدِهِ, that Allah Azza wa Jalla is more happier by the repentance of his servant than a man who was traveling in the desert with his camel that had his food and water, and he took a nap tying his camel next to him, only to wake up with the camel vanishing. And it's not there anymore. So he looked left, right, center, everywhere he can go. And when he felt in despair and depressed that he's unable to find it, he again lied on the ground, reckoning that he is dead. And he took a short nap and he woke up only to find his camel next to him. Imagine the amount of joy in his heart. He said, "Oh Allah, you are my servant and I'm your God." The Prophet says he made a mistake due to his jubilation, due to his happiness. Now this mistake is blatant kufr to anyone. So yeah, this is a kafir. Akhi, he is not a kafir. He made a mistake. And the mistake was in the words, not in his intention. So if you look at these hadiths, and they're authentic, they're in the Sahih, and compare apple to apple, you know the biggest mistake that these people are doing when they give takfir without applying these conditions and fulfilling that the obstacles do not exist. Whenever someone makes a mistake, it's a mistake. Allah Azza wa Jal holds him accountable only if it was done intentionally and not by mistake. So this type, which is error or mistake, is an obstacle that prevents us from giving takfir to people. And this happens a lot with people in communicating. Someone may say something that is wrong, and this is due to his ignorance. So like saying, "Ya akhi, this thing is not haram."
But he doesn't know if
he doesn't know. So this is an obstacle. Or he misinterprets it. Or he makes a mistake by saying something and it's a slip of the tongue. And you find the people, especially when he's a da'i or a scholar or a ruler, you find people rushing to the gun and making a witch hunt against this person because of a slip of the tongue. Akhi, rectify it. Let him ask for forgiveness. Explain it to him. So no, this mistake cannot be tolerated. And they immediately go to burn the switch.
SubhanAllah. You mentioned ruler. Now there's a very common phenomena of saying the ruler is kafir, the ruler of this country is kafir, the ruler of this. It's very common amongst Muslims everywhere. they make takfir of the rulers. Why is this there? What's the reason behind it? And does it have any Islamic basis to it or not?
Okay. The Prophet ﷺ saw this coming. And this is why if you read the Bukhari and the Muslim, the Sahih and the books of Hadith, you would find the Prophet ﷺ highlighting the importance of the Muslim ruler and governing him, protecting him, because as the scholars of the Salaf say, one day under the ruling of an oppressive tyrant is better than 70 years without any ruler. And this is very deep to think about it, because if you look at what they call the Arab Spring, people rebelled. They want democracy, they want fairness, and this is their right. You can't ask people to live under oppression and not talk. They require freedom. They require equality and fairness. But there are ways of attaining this other than that. So what happened? They rebelled against their rulers. And to rebel against your ruler, usually you will be faced by a number of hadiths preventing you from doing this. And that is that you cannot leave the Pledge of Allegiance to a Muslim ruler, otherwise you die the death of Jahiliyyah, of pre-Islamic era. So they were faced with this obstacle. I can't rebel. What should I do? What should I do? Let's give takfir to him. So the ruler is a kafir, which means that we don't have any pledge of allegiance to him, which means that we can attack him. And this cascades down. So if he's a kafir, this means that his cabinet is a kafir as well. They are his ministers and the prime ministers, and they serve his agenda. So they're kafir as well. And if they're kafir, those protecting them, such as the army, the civil defense, the police force, are kafir as well. And their wives and families and children, because they are accepting their role in the government, are kafir as well. So who's Muslim? You and I. That's it. So it cascades down. Now, they neglect or purposely ignore the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was addressing the companions in so many occasions. And in one occasion, the companions, when they heard about the bad rulers that the Prophet was telling them about and that they were coming in the future, the companions said, "O Prophet of Allah, shouldn't we fight them?" So now the Prophet ﷺ is explaining to his companions. The request was, can we rebel? Can we fight against the Muslim ruler who is bad as you have described? The Prophet ﷺ prohibited this. And he said, no. Unless, now look at these conditions set by the Prophet ﷺ, not by the scholars. It is him who stated it. He says, no, unless you, first of all, see, condition number 1. Blatant, condition number 2. Kufr, condition number 3. You have ample evidence from Allah Azza wa Jal. Condition number 4. إِلَّا أَن تَرَوْا كُفْرًا بَوَاحًا فِيهِ لَكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ بُرْهَانٌ. 4 conditions, and if you try to apply them on most, if not all, of the tyrants we have in the Arab world, it wouldn't fit them. But this doesn't suit their agenda and their personal vendetta. We want to give takfir to the rulers so that we can do all the chaos and mayhem we have or we want. So they deliberately ignore the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ. Or they throw in an evidence from here or there so that they would confuse the people and say that, listen, these evidences are clashing. How can they clash if they are from the Prophet himself ﷺ? And this was a revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. If you want to dissect the hadith and analyze it, you would see that, first of all, to give takfir to the ruler, you have to see. Most of us, if not all, did not see. We heard a person saying that a friend of his saw or heard something else. Akhi, this is not permissible. You have to see it and feel it and be a witness so that you're excused at the sight of Allah. It has to be blatant. Thirdly, kufr. So if it is not blatant, black and white, the guy is prostrating to Buddha, he's a kafir. This is blatant. It's crystal clear. But if he does something that is not kufr, for example, he says, riba is haram. Akhi, but you have these banks dealing in riba and interest. He said, no, this is not riba. My grand mufti or my grand scholar told me that riba is giving money and taking money, and this sort of extortion and oppressing the poor. What we're doing is with companies and with nations and with banks. So he told me that this is not riba. So this is not blatant, because he has misinterpretation. Kufr, meaning that if he says, yes, we deal in riba, we have bars and we sell intoxicants, and we have brothels and prostitutions, but they're all haram. I admit. Yet they're sinful. So you cannot rebel. He's sinful. He is one of the worst servants of Allah. I agree with you. I'm not defending him. But this does not allow you to do an act of rebellion, because he's still a Muslim ruler. Fourthly, you have ample proof from Allah that this is kufr. So it's not what a scholar said is kufr. You have ample proof from the Quran and the Sunnah that whoever does this is a kafir. And it's clear-cut evidence. So you see that Allah Azza wa Jal and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is protecting the Muslim ummah for the welfare of the ummah itself. It's not that we advocate transgression or being unfair, or we are the scholars of the palace, the petrodollar scholars, the milkshakes that people usually say about us. No, it is Allah's law, akhi. They don't pay us. We don't work for them, alhamdulillah azza wa jal. We're independent. They have nothing to do with us, and we have nothing to do with them. Even if they hire us, we would not work for them, because it's always fine to be independent and be able to express Islam and give it to people without any agendas. This is the ruling of Allah Azza wa Jal. It's not yours or mine to say. So this third obstacle, which is mistake and error, can also apply for the ruler. Why did he do this? It's a mistake. He was misinformed. The scholars that he have told him wrongly, they're sinful, but he's not. This is not blatant kufr.
It's similar to what we mentioned in the last episode, the person who doesn't know. He's ignorant or misinformed. The ruler himself falls under one of these categories.
Or by mistake. He did a mistake. Of course, there's a fourth condition.
We're going to get into the fourth condition. Before that, we're going to go for a short break. Dear viewers, so far we've gone over 3 of the conditions and 3 of the obstacles as well. We're going to go into the fourth condition, but before that, we're going to go for a short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Contemporary Islamic Issues on Huda TV. Now, before we went for that short break, we were discussing some of the obstacles and some of the conditions that are there for takfir. We've done 3 so far, and we said we were going to go into the 4th one as soon as we come back. So Sheikh, if you can start us off with the 4th obstacle, and then after we get the obstacles, we'll have some questions inshallah, and then we'll get into the consequences of takfir after that.
Okay, well, the 4th obstacle is when a person is doing an act of takfir or saying something that nullifies Islam out of compulsion. Somebody forcing him to do so. And the clearest evidence of this hadith of Ammar ibn Yasir, may Allah be pleased with him and with his father and mother, who was a slave at the time in Mecca, in the Meccan period. And he came once to the Prophet ﷺ weeping and sobbing. So the Prophet said, ﷺ, what's wrong? And throughout the tears, he managed to explain to the Prophet ﷺ that they kept on torturing him and tormenting him until he said something offensive against the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet asked him ﷺ, how do you find your heart when you uttered these words? Were you feeling good about it or not? And he said, my heart was filled with Iman, but I was tortured beyond my ability. The Prophet ﷺ comforted him and said, if they go back to torment you and torturing you, go back into saying negative things about me. You have a clear permission to do this as long as your heart is filled with Iman. So this kind of being forced or compulsion is an obstacle. So if someone gets to you, pointing a gun at your head and say, prostrate to this idol. If you prostrated because of the fear of being killed, this is totally permissible. And there's nothing wrong in that. Others who watch you do this can give you takfir, but it is due to their ignorance. They have to first make sure that there are no obstacles. Once they ask you and you tell them about the gunpoint, then they would have an excuse for you. However, such compulsion, such forceful act must be measured. Because not every
compulsion
is acceptable. A man comes to me, said, Sheikh, I was compelled to divorce my wife. He says, why? She threatened me and I had to divorce her. Okay, if she threatened you and you were afraid, then yes, the divorce doesn't take place. But wait a minute. How did she threaten you? She said, I'm not going to cook dinner for you. I said, Akhi, what is this? This is nonsense. So this kind of compulsion is unacceptable. It has to be serious, something that would harm you physically or jeopardize your livelihood. And it has to be from someone who's capable of executing it. I had to divorce my wife. Why? My toddler, he's 4 years old, he threatened me to kill me with a knife. And he's not unable to do this, and he can fight him off. He can do so many things. So this kind of compulsion, again, is not realistic. So this is the fourth obstacle, which the condition that must be applied is intending to do something willingly. And these are some of the conditions that must be fulfilled before giving takfir. When he made that act, when he said that statement, did he intend it? Was he doing it willingly or out of compulsion? So this is a type of the obstacles. The conditions are similar. But for example, if someone who is insane, we know that he is not sane, he is crazy, he's mad, he's a lunatic, he's not held accountable at the sight of Allah, and he does an act of kufr, he steps on the Quran, or he curses Allah. Can we execute him? Can we give him takfir? Definitely not. The man is not sane. So a child, for example, and this happens in our houses, an infant of like 2-3 years of age takes the Quran and tears the pages of it. Of course, without us knowing it. And when we see it, what do? Oh, look at this kafir. He's 3 years old. Yeah, how can you give takfir to this child? So these things have to be taken into consideration, that whether he is doing it willingly, whether he's doing it with knowledge, whether he knows the consequences, whether the act itself is labeled in the Quran and Sunnah as kufr or not. So these are some of the aspects.
Okay, so just to recap from last episode and this episode, the four major obstacles that we mentioned, the first one being ignorance. So if a person doesn't even know that this deed is kufr, or if it's allowed or whatever the situation may be, but it's complete ignorance. The second one is misinterpretation. So he knows the ruling but misinterpreted it in a wrong way. Interpreted it in a wrong way. The third is error. So he said something by accident and didn't intend, and you gave that wonderful example from the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And then the fourth one that we just spoke about is compulsion, that somebody has forced him to say something that he did not mean. His intention inside of his heart did not match the reality that came out of his mouth. Now, after that, I want to get into some of the consequences that are tied with and come with takfir.
Takfir is a major issue. And the more the people are away from Islam, the more you would find them doing heinous acts because of their lack of knowledge, because of their ignorance, because of following their desires and whims. So takfir, if a person goes into it, he ends up in a vicious circle. And this vicious circle affects not only him on personal aspects, but the whole ummah. Because you find this coming and apparent in a lot of the youth and the Muslim circles due to their ignorance. And this is why I always believe that the enemies of Islam and also those disbelievers who have good intent, but they are not well acquainted with Islamic teaching, they prevent scholars, they prevent students of knowledge from relaying, from teaching the proper Islam. And this causes these masses living in their countries to grow in their ignorance and take the wrong decisions, which affect not only their communities, but the whole of the reputation of Islam. The consequences of takfir, first of all, is arrogance. When I give you takfir, I'm actually being arrogant because I think that I'm better than you. Unless the takfir is legit. But I'm talking about those who give takfir without knowledge. They keep on giving takfir to everyone else so that they would elevate themselves over everyone else. Among the consequences of takfir is repelling people against Islam. So when I see that a Muslim keeps on giving takfir to good people who are praying and fasting and doing everything that is good in Islam and staying away from haram things, I had to have second thoughts about Islam. Is this a religion I want to accept or not? The third and most dangerous aspect is that a person who gives takfir takes the ruling of Allah Azza wa Jal and puts it in a wrong place. So why is it a vicious circle? Because a person ends up in bloodshed, in chaos, in having disorder in the Muslim country or Muslim community, which affects Islam, affects the Muslims, and affects the whole world.
Okay, so for example, obviously there's always going to be people who do takfir of everybody, and like you mentioned, some of the consequences that are there. But how do the regular Muslims, or the masses of the Muslims, deal with these people who do takfir of everybody, who constantly do takfir, and say, okay, this person's kafir because he's done this person's kafir because he's done this? How do we deal with the people doing the takfir?
Okay. The first thing is you have to debate with them and call them to Islam. This happened with Abdullah ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, when a group of Khawarij, mounting to approximately like 8,000 or more individuals, went against Ali ibn Abi Talib, the fourth caliph, and said, Ali is kafir. Imagine that. One of the 10 heavenly bound, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, his son-in-law, being who he is, with his knowledge and his ranking in Islam, these deviant cult comes and say he's a kafir. So he wanted to fight them off. He's a Muslim ruler. So Abdullah ibn Abbas, his cousin, told him, let me go and talk to them. So he took his suit and went to speak with them, and he debated with them. And they debated with him. But he managed to overtake him, to take them easily, because he was knowledgeable with the Quran and the Sunnah. And 4,000 went back with him, accepting Islam and repenting from this corrupt ideology. So you have to speak to them to try and clear their misconceptions.
Okay, so that works for everything usually. I mean, the discussing and it allows you to inform the person of the truth of Islam and the actual interpretations of the ayahs. Just like we mentioned, some of the barriers. One of them was misinterpretation. Another one was ignorance. This is the same situation here. So it's just the opposite people. On this side, this is the people being done the takfir to, and this is the people giving the takfir. In both cases, you need to inform them and conversate with them. Shaykh, we're at the end of the episode, so I want to thank you very much for joining us here on Huda TV. Thank you very much. Dear viewers, I hope you benefited from the last episode of the series for takfir. We've done 3 episodes of takfir as a whole set. Inshallah, join us again for more contemporary issues. And until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.